So Ava was your third child. So you had experience of having children before. Obviously, I was a first-time mum. So our experiences, I think, even being pregnant were probably very different. Tell me a bit about your journey with, getting pregnant with Ava and then what happened from there, really.
Don't know whether you want the story of the getting pregnant with Ava. So I guess hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? So we had a postnatal diagnosis with Ava. So in terms of the pregnancy, I would say everything was the same as it was with the other two up to a point. As I say, in hindsight, she didn't move as much, which possibly could have been an indicator to me that she had Down syndrome, but it wasn't even in my realm of thinking through the pregnancy.
And I remember people saying that to me when I was pregnant, you might not feel as much movement, but I was just permanently kicked. So it's different for everybody, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And she did, as I say, looking back, she did move a lot less than the other two. And there were some other things as well. So I had a low-lying placenta, so I'd had to go in for extra scans towards the end of the pregnancy just to make sure that so the placenta had moved so that to work out whether I could kind of go through with a natural birth or whatever. And at that point, they'd measured her femur length as being short, so they thought she was going to be quite small. So they were wanting to induce me early based on her size. And still at this point, we had no idea. Again, hindsight.
Because obviously that's a soft marker, isn't it? And I know people have gone on to have diagnoses based on that.
Yeah. So
but I guess if you were quite far along, they just didn't think they needed to do more investigation, I guess.
So, well, from the normal blood test that I actually didn't realise was you didn't have to have it. I just had it with all three of them to kind of assess the chances of having a child with Down syndrome. And that came back, it was slightly higher than it had been with my other two, but it was still classed as being fairly low chance, really. So there was just nothing to suggest that she might have Down syndrome in my mind. I did get induced early. I think it was probably about a week and a half early. Part of that was because I had horrific SPD and I was just sick of my life and just was like, it's fine, just take me, do what you need to do. So we did go in early. And because we were going in to be induced, we had kind of told friends and family that I was going in that day to have Ava. So I felt like a lot of people were waiting on the birth announcement, knowing that she was being born that day. I'd had quite quick births with both of the other two. So I had anticipated that Ava would be quite a quick birth as well. So she literally came flying out. The midwife didn't have enough time to get her gloves on before she kind of shot into the birthing pool. So it was very quick. She did need to kind of have a little bit of oxygen, partly because it was so quick, but also because there was the Down syndrome to kind of consider there as well. Apparently, the midwives aren't allowed to tell you that they suspect that the baby has Down syndrome. So our midwife was asking a lot of questions around it, like, does she look like your other children? And how's she feeding compared to your other children? And
so again, with hindsight, if you'd have known why you might have been a bit more suspicious about those questions.
And I guess I was. So I knew as soon as I looked at her. And
you had a feeling anyway.
Yeah, I said to Andrew, so I'd waited until all the midwives and all the kind of medical staff had gone out of the room. And I'd said to Andrew, do you think she has Down syndrome? And his response was, no, of course not. All babies look like Winston Churchill. They're all a bit screwed up. So, and I was like, oh, okay. And there was just that niggle in the back of my mind. And it was evening time by this point. He'd decided to go home to kind of look after the other kids. And I was left then in the hospital. And I just kept looking at her. And I was Googling on the on and off hospital Wi-Fi to kind of look for features of Down syndrome. And I was like looking at her ears, looking at her hands to see whether she had the palmar crease. And I was like, no, her hands have got...
She had the two
she's got
creases, not the one.
Yeah. Looked at her toes. I had the kind of the stockings on to stop you clotting. So I was like peeled it back to look at my toes. I was like, well, I've got a bit of a bigger gap between my toes. So it might just be that she's got similar feet to me.
Yeah, because the sandal toe thing is a funny one, isn't it? Because it seems with some children like Lucy, it seems to start to develop a bit later on. Like even at birth, Lucy didn't have a gap at all.
So Ava does have a slight gap, but I do.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So
yeah.
it was really hard. And then I was pulling up photographs of my other children from when they were little to kind of try and compare facial features.
Bless you. I mean, it sounds like your mind was going like 20 million miles an hour, which isn't ideal when you've just had a baby because it already is probably doing that.
And I think so. She was latching on to feed, but she wasn't feeding. But I think it was the fact I'd had experience with the older two that I knew to kind of hand express and feed her so that she was getting something.
Yeah. Which I didn't get that support.
Yeah, and if I hadn't had my other two children, I probably wouldn't have even known to do that. So I did feel kind of quite alone. And again, I'd kind of said to the midwife through the night, is there anything wrong with my baby? And she was like, well, what do you think is wrong? Not that there is anything wrong, I would like to say. But obviously at that point, that
terminology you're bound to use. I
didn't know what was going on. Yeah. So we did get the diagnosis the following morning. Wasn't done in the best way, but that's a whole other story.
So had they taken bloods during the day? And
no, it was in the morning. They said that
they came and said they thought that Ava might have Down syndrome.
Has anyone told you that your baby might have, or it was something basically, has anyone said that your baby might have some kind of syndrome? And I was like, and I was on my own at this point. Andrew hadn't yet made it back into the hospital. So they then took bloods. And then obviously my mind went to all that, oh my God, what could it possibly kind of be? I will use wrong in inverted commas for now. But yeah. So
you started panicking because they didn't even really talk about what it might be, because there are syndromes that are compatible with life, supposedly, although they're now starting to backtrack a little bit on that, aren't they?
So actually going back to the night before when we did give birth to her, I made sure I took a picture from a very specific angle so that it wasn't clear that, because obviously I thought she had Down syndrome, but we weren't sure. And I just did a very quick kind of baby's been born. And I don't think I even put it on social media. I think
just sent it privately.
Yeah. But because people had known I'd been going in to be induced, people were starting to ask kind of later that day. So it did take a bit of, how am I going to word this? And we didn't know anyone with Down syndrome at that point. I had no one to kind of go and speak to ask. I didn't know.
That was the same as me at that point in my pregnancy.
Yes, exactly, but I guess you didn't need to, there wasn't the expectation to announce something at that.
No, exactly, because nobody other than close friends and family knew we were pregnant. So therefore, it was all very private until we chose to make it public, whereas you felt you needed to make something
So we
public
did
quickly.
We worded it very much around it doesn't really matter. She is loved by all of us. I didn't know, stupidly, I didn't know how my immediate family were going to react to it, which clearly I didn't need to be worried about that because Ava is totally loved and adored.
But the reality is if you didn't know anybody, around your family and friend circles that had Down syndrome or had children with Down syndrome, then you don't know
how anyone.
You don't sit across the dinner table and say, "How do you feel about people with Down syndrome?" It's not something you would discuss unless it came up.
And even if people did have a point of view, I think once it's a family member or a close friend, I think that changes very quickly.
Yeah, it does,
anyway, I could have quite easily been one of the 90% of people who terminate pregnancy.